transparency and electoral campaign. So very briefly, you will be talking about these committees, as we have to focus on particular reference to. Hello everyone, welcome. Myself Vivek Raj. Today I will be talking about the UPSC Mains 2024 GS paper 2, and particularly I will be dealing with the polity and constitution, and after that I'll be also taking up the social issues questions, the social justice question, right? So basically, first of all, I will talk about the nature of the question paper, the entire question paper of GS paper 2, how it went and how it was different from the last year question paper. We will talk about that first of all. Okay, so if I am commenting on that what was the nature of question, then I have seen that the question paper was little tricky. We cannot say that it was so much of difficulty it was having, or we can say it was too easy, but definitely we can place it under the category of moderate category. Okay, so as we have seen that there have been questions in this particular paper which were asking for a particular specific information. They were very specific or oriented to a particular idea. For example, first question that we will be looking into, that was talking about the one election, one nation, one election, and so it asks for various committees recommendation, and with that of special focus on the one nation, one election, right? And similarly, they have given other questions where, like, on the face of that question, it will be looking like that question is very obvious, but when you will be start writing, then you will get to know that there are so much of technicalities involved. And for example, we got a question with respect to Lok Adalat and the arbitration mechanism. So if we are looking into that, then what we generally found is that people used to have very brief idea about the Lok Adalat and the arbitration process, right? But they asked about the comparison, so it becomes difficult for the people, because it may not be possible for people to write the distinction with respect to the 5 points. Okay, so this may be a possibility. So question paper has been of moderate level, and definitely the question that they asked, they were from the very known topics, we can say. They were not very unknown kind of topics, right? So let's begin with the questions. So here is the first question that you can see. So question is about examine the need for electoral reforms as suggested by various committees with particular, this is very, very important keyword of this particular question, with particular reference to one nation, one election principle, right? So if you will be talking about need for electoral reform suggested by various committees, then it may not be serving the purpose for this particular question. The question is specifically asking that with particular reference to one nation, one election. So while you will be talking about various committees, it should be carefully noted that you are not over explaining the recommendations of the committee, but you are completely focusing, or most of the time you are focusing on this particular aspect, that is particular reference to one nation, one election. I hope the idea is very clear. So here I have some list of the electoral reforms committees that we have seen in the past. So first you can see that Justice Venkatachalya Commission, so it provided for reforms in appointment of election commissioner, decriminalization of politics, increase financial transparency in electoral campaign. So very briefly you will be talking about these committees, as we have to focus on particular reference to one election, one nation, one election. Okay, then we have the Goswami Committee. It also provided for electoral malpractices, like it recommendation with respect to this. Then curb excessive expenditure by the candidate, it was provided by this committee. Okay, so briefly you will be talking about these committees because reforms suggested by various committees, but a special focus will be on the one nation, one election. Okay. Then the next we have is National Commission to review working of the Constitution, right? National Commission to, commission to review the working of the Constitution. So it has provided for curbing the national political defection, addressing black money, then suggested state funding of electoral campaign, limits the undue influence. About all these things it talked about, right? Then the most importantly, we got the Law Commission of India 2018 in its 170th report. 170th report. So under this particular report, it has talked about particularly about the one nation, one election. How it drafted simultaneous holding all direct election in the country, beginning from Panchayat up to Lok Sabha within a time period of a single year. So the Law Commission of India in its 170th report clearly talked about the one nation, one election. So for sure you should mention this thing. In 2018 this report was compiled, and then obviously we are very much aware of that in the September 2023 only Ramnath Kovind committee was established, right? At that same point of time we got that, if you remember, the session was conducted after the G20, and the Nari Shakti Adhiniyam was also passed. So at that point of time only we appointed this high powered committee, that is Ramnath Kovind committee, report on the simultaneous polls, okay, and it recommended for one nation, one election. And we are aware of that cabinet nod has been given to the one nation, one election. So you can say that just before 2-3 days before the exam we were having news related to the one nation, one election, and we got the question, right? Can we say that? Definitely. Okay. So these are the committees. Okay. Now again we will be looking into the question. So what is the question? Examine the need for electoral reforms is suggested by various committees. So what you have mentioned till now, we have looked into the committees, okay, but how exactly one should start? Okay, so in the introduction part you can start with the current affairs. You can talk about that, the recently Prime Minister has talked about, mooted the idea of simultaneous election, the one nation, one election. So that kind of intro you can start. After that you will be talking about the committees, and then you will be talking about the pros and cons of the one nation, one election. I mean to say, we will be explaining the one nation, one election, like what it is, benefit it will be providing, what consequences it will be having, right? So let's look into that now. So you see that if we will be having one nation, one election principle, then first of all it will be cost effective, because again and again differently we are not supposed to conduct elections. Then less election fatigue, because we are aware of when the elections are being conducted, then at that point of time so much of machinery is being deployed. The ITBP people, the CRPF people, they are being deployed for the election duty. So isliye we are talking about that less election fatigue will be there, right? Then after that, time efficiency, we will be able to save the time. We generally used to say that cost and the time will be saved, right? Then we have the model code of conduct. So in what reference I have mentioned the model code of conduct here? Because if we will have this one nation, one election, then every time our country will not be subjected to some or the other model code of conduct, right? Because we are aware of currently also that the people are some or the other state are subjected to the MCC, like in Haryana, okay, the elections are going on, so we are having the model code of conduct. So हम ये बोल रहे हैं that if model code of conduct will be there, then there will be the major decisions will not be taken. So can we say that developmental walk will be hampering? So because of that we are highlighting, okay. So model of code of conduct problem will be there. Then robust governance. that we will be able to focus on the long term policies. We will not be just subjected to the outcomes of the result, or the result, elections are coming, so because of that we are taking certain measures. It will not be like that, but every time we will be having the long term agenda, that is, it will be bringing about the robust governance in the country. Then there will be some challenges also. So these challenges you can see, it will be reducing the accountability. How exactly? Because we are aware of that during the time of election, generally the politician used to visit, generally the politician used to be accountable to the people. Okay, so when elections will be taking place after every 5 years, then certainly we can say it may be reducing the accountability, because those politicians will be very free and they will be thinking elections are not coming as of now in a very current near future, so let's not talk about the accountability, let's not care about the people's welfare, right? So in that context we are saying, when elections will be taking place in the once in a 5 year, it may be leading toward the reduced accountability. Then dilution of local issues. This is also called as the hijacking of local issues. How exactly? This is why this is I'm highlighting this, because we are aware of that when we are having the general elections, right? So at that point of time, what kind of atmosphere we used to have? That very less focus on the local issues. What are the problems of that particular issues? But ultimately people will be focusing on the national issues, the general elections people will be focusing on. So by that logic we are commenting on that it may be diluting or hijacking the local issues. National issues will be more important. Okay. Then we have the imbalance of power. Imbalance of power, I mean to say, with respect to the state and the center. So there will be disturbance, balance will be disturbed, that kind of power that we have provided. For example, we have the 7th schedule of the Indian Constitution, which provides for various lists. So that kind of imbalance may be there when the state, the kind of elections that will be taking place once in a 5 year. The central government will become all powerful, right? Then undermining federalism. So one nation, one election may be undermining the federalism. How? Because the definition of federalism is division of power, that there exists the two authorities. The national government will be different, the state governments will be different, and they will be exercising their powers differently. Okay, but when we are conducting elections simultaneously, although there will be separate election for the state election, but when we are having the election at same point of time, then the idea of having the separate state, having the separate government may be diluting under the big name that is called as the center. Because the kind of passion people used to have for the general election, those in that wave we can say the issues will be diluting, local issues will be diluting. So by that logic we can say there may be problem for the federalism. Okay, so these are the benefits, these are the challenges that we may be getting out of the one nation one election. Okay, so what you will be suggesting out of this? Now you cannot conclude abruptly, so you will be concluding in a very holistic manner that one nation one election is not a new idea. The simultaneous elections were taking place in our country till 1967. So this time also one nation one election we cannot just avoid, we can go with it, right? Provided all the stakeholders are taken into consideration, all the constitution norms we are taking into the consideration. Okay, and we are very concerned about the kind of federal polity that we are having. We are very concerned about the local issues that every corner of India is having. If the kind of election that we will be having, the kind of mechanism that we will be following, if these kind of things will be there, then no issues with that. Definitely we can go with the simultaneous election. I hope the idea is very clear. I hope the idea is very clear and it is making good sense. it is making very good sense that conclusion should be very holistic, very futuristic. You will be suggesting that taking all the stakeholders on board, and definitely we can go for the simultaneous elections. Okay, and definitely we have talked about the positives and the negatives. So the futuristic, the very balanced kind of conclusion you will be adding, and that way you will be ending this question, right? Then we have the next question in front of us. So by looking into this question, I was highlighting that certainly we cannot say that question paper was easy. How? Because looking into this, what kind of feeling you will be having? Lok Adalat, I know. Arbitration tribunal, I know. But have you compared them? Because more or less, when it comes to the ADR, that is alternate dispute resolution mechanisms, we used to think that they will be having more or less same kind of thing. Have you ever thought of comparing? So that is the problem with the question paper, that here you are supposed to compare. So that may be bothering you. Okay, so let's have a look into. So what else we are supposed to do in this question? Explain and distinguish between Lok Adalat, arbitration tribunal, whether they entertain civil as well as criminal cases. So first of all, we are supposed to explain and distinguish this Lok Adalat and arbitration tribunal. Then the next question is being added, entertain the civil as well as cases, whether they used to entertain or not, right? So first of all, how we should approach this question? First of all, we should be explaining the alternate dispute resolution. Okay, that you can see, it refers to the means by which disputes are settled outside the traditional courts, outside the traditional judiciary, like the regular courts, the High Court and the Supreme Court and the other district courts. Out of that we are suggesting. Okay, so in India, models of ADR include the arbitration, negotiation, mediation and Lok Adalats. Okay, so you gave this brief introduction about the ADRs, right? Just after that, these definitions may be long, but very briefly you will be explaining the Lok Adalat and you will be explaining the arbitration. Okay, so that is what you are supposed to do, and this is very important that you are mentioning this particular law, that is National Legal Service Authority Act 1987. Popularly it is called as NALSA. Okay, so you will talk about the Lok Adalat, what are they, and you will talk about the arbitration tribunal. So what are these Lok Adalats? Aimed at resolving the disputes amicably, this is very important, and swiftly. They function through the mediation and conciliation involving the community. So this is what the Lok Adalats are. If we are looking into the arbitration tribunal, then we have the Arbitration and Conciliation Act 1996. The parties agrees to submit dispute to the arbitrator, and here for a binding decision will be there, and the process is structured compared to the Lok Adalats. So here we will be having the structured process in case of arbitration tribunal. Okay, so what is the broad idea? That we are having first of all we are defining the ADRs, then we are defining the Lok Adalats, then the arbitration tribunals. Okay, now we are supposed to explain and distinguish. So here you see the distinguish, already you explained, now you are distinguishing the Lok Adalats and the arbitration, the difficult kind of thing. And earlier part also was difficult, because I mentioned that we used to take the Lok Adalats and all the arbitration tribunals in the similar way. That is what we perceive. Okay, anyways, so Lok Adalat we are comparing now. They are formal and less rigid, but arbitration tribunal will be formal, structured legal framework. Okay, and after that we'll have based on consensus and negotiation, then we'll have based on legal principles and evidences they will be. Okay, here we have non-judicial, presided over by judge or a legal expert, but they will be having the judicial authorities. Okay, then this is very important, like they will be primarily dealing with the civil and compounded criminal cases. Why this is important? because if you remember, in the question itself, they have mentioned whether they are dealing with the criminal cases or not. So from here you are getting that idea that they are dealing with the civil as well as the compounded criminal cases, right? Then mainly civil disputes, including commercial and contractual, they do not typically handle criminal cases. Okay, so that is what you are supposed to highlight. Last part of the question is highlighting. Okay, then decisions are not legally binding, decision will be legally binding, and then we have generally low cost and quick, but here costly and lengthy process will be there in case of the arbitration tribunals. So I hope the idea is very clear, and you have explained, you have distinguished, and at the very end you will be adding that these kind of the case with respect to the civil and criminal proceedings, like what will be the scenario with respect to dealing with the civil cases and what will be the scenario with respect to the dealing with the criminal cases. Okay, so this is about this particular question. Now this is very analytical kind of question. The important question again we have, and we can say this is core polity question. Rest of the questions we can say related to governance, right, some or the other way, because we cannot particularly or concretely say that this is the polity question or the governance question, because there is so much of overlap, everything is governance, right? So this is core polity question. Now just have a look into this. Growth of cabinet system has practically resulted in marginalization of parliamentary supremacy. Elucidate. Okay, so here you are like explain based on the particular evidences, right? Growth of cabinet system has practically resulted into the marginalization of the parliamentary sovereignty. Okay, so first of all we should have idea what is this cabinet system, how it is increasing, how it is being emphasized, and then we should have also idea about what do we meant by this parliamentary sovereignty, right? So cabinet, here you should consider it as the executive branch of the state, because it is someone who is responsible for taking major policy decisions, right? And what is that? Legislature is for there to discuss the bills, to formulate the bill, to vote on the bills, right, to legislate the bill. Like procedure they will be following in the house of people, and they will be accordingly passing the bill or not passing the bill or discussing and like that. Okay, and there are so other parliamentary tools also, like 0 hour, question hour, debates and discussions and all those things. So they will be belonging to the legislature. And certainly when we are talking about the parliamentary sovereignty, meaning that whether the Parliament of India is completely free to make any kind of legislation as per its will or not, or some authority is above it and some or the other way it is influencing, or it is curbing, or it is dominating over the supremacy of Parliament, right? So in that context we need to look into this question. Now we are aware of that, especially in these last 10 years, we have been witnessing a very strong government with the brutal majority. When we are having this much of government, like when it is having all kind of majority, more than 300 seats in the Lok Sabha, this time they are not having. Okay, so definitely there are chances that executive will be very strong, and they will be able to exercise more power in comparison to the previous government, or in comparison to the present day government that we are having after 4th June 2024. They will be trying to come up with more ordinances to make laws. Okay, they may be disqualifying opposition members. Less scope for discussion will be there, because government is all powerful. Okay, so in that context this question is being asked, that executive is becoming more powerful, we are having a powerful prime minister. So growth of cabinet system, now the cabinet is more important. they are taking majority of decision, right? So now we need to look into. So first of all, in the introduction part, you will be giving simple scenario that I mentioned, that growth of the cabinet, how it is impacting. So you can just talk about some current scenario, like you can simply mention whatever I mentioned just now, that nowadays, like in the previous last 10 years, there has been debate all the time that government having majority, too much of majority in the house is more powerful. It may be not listening to the voices of the representative, the MPs we can say particularly, or the house of people. It may be undermining that. Okay, so that kind of introduction you can provide. Okay, only 2-3 line introduction. It should not be going beyond 20 or 30 words. That's all, because it's just a 10 marker. Okay. After that, as I used to suggest this always, that you should be using the question language as the heading. Okay, so here we made a heading, argument for marginalization of parliamentary sovereignty due to growth of cabinet system. Okay, so we are just writing and we are making arguments in favor of the statement that it is saying the growth of cabinet has led to the marginalization of parliamentary sovereignty. So we are arguing in favor of that. How exactly? Concentration of power in the executive. If the growth of cabinet will be there, it is being said. So we are just confirming to that, yes, the concentration of power in the executive. Now, power is more concentrated on the executive. For example, during the COVID, the question hour was suspended. During the COVID, so many ordinances government came up with, and there were bills which we were not referring to the standing committees, and they were just passed. So concentration of power in the executive. So iska matlab, the kind of statement that the question is making is being validated, because I mentioned you that executive is becoming more powerful. Okay, so this is the first logic. Then after that we have party system and whip mechanism. We are aware of that in case of parliament, or for that matter in the state legislature also, every party will be having the whip, and whip is a person who will be representative of the party, we can say, who will be guiding all the members of that particular political party in that particular house. So this is the whip, and suppose that particular political party is going to vote in a particular issue tomorrow, right? So if any member of that particular political party is not following the instructions given by the whip, then that person may be disqualified from the political party. So now by this logic, we are again conforming to the same fact that yes, this is evidencing, this is witnessing that yes, the whip kind of thing that we are having, or the kind of party system that we have evolved over a period of time, it is just providing for the compromise on the what do you say, the sovereignty of the parliament. Because यहाँ पे whip की बात माननी पड़ेगी ना. It is not about that your will. It is not about the will of the member of the parliament. For example, a particular MP has been elected from the state of Andhra Pradesh. Now that MP wants to vote for a particular bill. For example, government is coming up with the uniform civil code. Then that particular MP somehow is not supporting the government. But that MP cannot do that if his party is not willing for that. So meaning that ultimately it is compromising on the sovereignty of parliament. It is compromising on the will of that. So I hope the idea is very clear. Then we have the decreasing role in lawmaking. Okay, so major economic reforms like 1991 liberalization were executive decisions limited to the parliamentary involvement. So we are taking the executive decision, right? And it is not the decision which are taking in the concurrence with the parliament. No, but these are the executive decisions. So again we can say the executive, the more executive is becoming powerful, more the parliamentary sovereignty is being compromised. Then we have delegated legislation. So ordinance making power in India allows executive to bypass the parliament on the urgent situations. So definitely these kind of issue also is creating a problem with respect to the parliamentary sovereignty. Okay. So here we have added some points which are favoring the statement given in the question. Now we have other argument that we are supposed to make. Argument against marginalization of parliamentary sovereignty due to the growth of cabinet system. Okay. Now we are making the counter arguments that no, it is not like that. If the powerful government is there, if the executive is strong, then it is not always true that it will be necessarily compromising on the sovereignty of parliament. No, it is not like that. Okay. How? Parliamentary oversight and the committee. That parliamentary oversight will be there, and we are having so many committees to look after that. So necessarily we cannot say that yes, the parliamentary sovereignty is being compromised. These things are still existing. It is bringing about the parliamentary oversight and the committee. Okay. Then debates and question hour, they are still existing. So how we can say that executive is becoming more powerful, so it is necessarily compromising on the sovereignty of parliament, right? So although the kind of example that I gave earlier, that the question hour was suspended in July 2021 during the COVID times. Okay. So that was the very extreme kind of example, but otherwise definitely we can say, since the debates, the question hour, the discussions, and so many other parliamentary tools, for example, the no confidence motion, for example, the censure motion, and so on, right? Like in case of budget passing, we have the policy cut motion, token cut motions, right? That. So we cannot say that growth of cabinet system is necessarily, compromising on the sovereignty of the parliament. Okay. Next, we have the collective responsibility. What is the meaning of this? That COM, that the Council of Ministers will be collectively responsible to the Lok Sabha. So if it is collectively responsible, then how we can say that it is compromising on the parliamentary sovereignty? So again, it is not validating. Then we have the legislative powers of parliament. So parliament is having so much of legislative powers. What are the legislative powers? That there will be certain procedures, the bill will be passed with simple majority, separate special majority, type 1, type 2, then special majority type 3, and the kind of bill that we will be having in the house, then accordingly that process will be followed. Okay. And everything will be done as per the process. Even if the speaker is taking decision, it will be also following the rules and regulations of the Lok Sabha and the Rajya Sabha respectively. Okay. So legislative powers of parliament with respect to lawmaking, looking into these points, definitely we can say it is nowhere compromising on the sovereignty of the parliament. Okay. So I hope this question is making good sense, and it was required that you are discussing both the angles. So आपको एक बार question फिर से दिखा देते हैं. When it is talking about the elucidate, so because of that we provided some concrete data, concrete facts, I mean to say data का तो यहाँ पे क्या ही scope होगा, and then we commented. That is what the meaning of elucidate is, and we covered all the aspect related to the question. ठीक है. Next we have is a very straightforward question, this much. इसको हम easy question बोल सकते हैं definitely without any doubt. So question is about duty of Comptroller and Auditor General is not merely to ensure expenditure, the legality of expenditure, but also propriety. Okay. So यहाँ पे first of all the question should be making good sense to us. Okay. So हमारा पहला इसका aspect क्या है? That we should be aware of the duties of CAG. What are the duties of CAG? To bring about the audits of various government offices, the various government expenditures, right? So first of all we should be aware of. One. The two, we are supposed to understand why the question is saying it also its propriety. Propriety here means to have the moral values, to have the responsibility, to have the accountability. It is not that you just conducted the audit and whether the amount that was allocated for that scheme, whether that has been used, how that has been used. It is not that you are just calculating on numbers, but it is also the calculation basis on responsibility. Okay, and you are analyzing the justice, you are analyzing the reasonability of that particular expenditure. You are understanding that whether there was a need for that or not, whether that amount that we provided was efficiently used or not. All that the CAG is supposed to consider. So that is what the question is asking. Okay, so आप easily समझ सकते हो what should be the, the structure for this answer. First of all, you will be writing about the constitutional provisions with respect to CAG. सबसे अच्छा होगा अगर constitutional provisions लिखोगे, ठीक है. So duties of CAG यहाँ पे लिखा हुआ है directly, but यहाँ पे हम एक introduction add करेंगे. In introduction, you will be writing about that Article 148 of the Indian Constitution provides for the office of CAG. It is responsible for the audit. Okay. Then, so we have this. Then, so after introduction, you will be talking about certain duties of Comptroller and Auditor General. Very static part of this answer. Very static part. इसमें आपको कुछ भी extra नहीं लिखना है. Only same things which you would have learned from the Lakshmikants, right? So first of all, you are writing about the constitutional mandate. Article 148 of the Indian Constitution, making it constitutional authority responsible for auditing the government's account. ठीक है? Its primary duty is to audit expenditure from Consolidated Fund of India, state, union territory to ensure the transparency and accountability. तो आप सिर्फ basic function लिख रहे हो what the CAG is responsible for. ठीक है? Very simple question. I will again say. ठीक है? Then you will be talking about ensuring legality of expenditure. तो आप expenditure की legality को भी ensure करना है. That is also the duty. Auditing of transactions, that is also the duty. So you are just explaining the duty in a very static manner. ठीक है? Then after that, propriety audit. So this is the other aspect of the question. Like after explaining the duties of CAG, I hope you will be understanding that. वो आप आराम से कर लोगे. Then propriety audit. ठीक है? So यहाँ पे क्या बोल रहे हैं? Refers to ethical and judicious use of funds. ठीक है? So this is the crux. इसके direction में you are supposed to write answer that CAG role is not limited to checking whether the expenditure is legally correct, but it is also justified, it is economical, reasonable and efficient. CAG is also supposed to do this. ठीक है? So सबसे पहले introduction, brief introduction about the CAG. What is CAG? Then after that you are writing about the duties of CAG. Then propriety wala, how propriety is important, what is propriety, all this you will be explaining. Okay. And after that you will be adding a conclusion to end your answer. And conclusion में आप लिखोगे highlighting the importance of propriety, that since the CAG is having very important role to play in the democratic setup, then it is very important that it is performing the propriety duty. Okay, that it is actually, with the open mind, and it is sensible office. It is understanding what is the need and where the public money should be spent on. So emphasizing on the direction of propriety, you will be concluding your answer. Okay, so I hope it is making good sense. Now we'll move on to the next question. So next question is, this is again very simple question, because इस question में भी you will find कि we are not having any complexities which may be bothering us, right? So आप देख सकते हो, analyze the role of local bodies in providing good governance. Okay, I hope we are aware of the features of good governance: transparency, accountability, inclusivity and responsibility, right? And equity, all those things. So वो हमें पता होना चाहिए. So analyze the role of local bodies and in the good governance at local levels. ठीक है? Discuss the pros and cons of merging rural local bodies with urban local bodies. So here also we are having the first part and the second part of the question. We are having two parts. So first part is very easy, because if you will be aware of, through the local bodies we provided for the decentralization, that is 73rd and the 74th Constitutional Amendment Act. ठीक है? So they provided for the decentralization. When we will be having decentralization, then definitely some or the other way we are giving effect to the governance, good governance. How? Because after having 73rd and 74th Constitutional Amendment Act, we will be providing opportunities for the people to participate in the governance process. तो हमारे पास participation आ गया. Now, when we will be having the local government, people will be more, the elected representatives will be more accountable to the people. Now people can ask question to those people. We are not getting the clean drinking water. Sanitation problem is there in the locality. So now those kind of questions can be asked. So explaining the features of 73rd and 74th Constitutional Amendment Act, you will be establishing this fact that it has provided for the good governance. You can also write that if these bodies are providing the 1/3 of the reservation to the women, then certainly we can say it is providing for the participation of women, so the good governance is taking place. It is providing for 1/3 of reservation to the scheduled caste and the scheduled tribes, so the good governance is taking place. So all the features that we have, आप 4-5 तो at least लिखेंगे, and you will be explaining about how the local bodies are providing for the good governance. Number 1. Number 2, discuss the pros and cons of merging. So ये थोड़ा नया है, and it is something which generally people do not use. ठीक है? आप न्यूज़पेपर अगर रेगुलर बेसिस पे पढ़ोगे, then you will have point, कोई डाउट नहीं उस पर. बट अगर थोड़ा कम अपडेटेड रहेंगे लोग तो इसके बारे में हो सकता है आइडिया ना हो. ठीक है? So I hope this point is very clear. Now here we have the pros and cons for the merging local bodies. ठीक है? I hope idea is very clear. We are talking about the PRIs merging with the urban local bodies, ULBs. ठीक है? So pros क्या होगा? Benefit for peripheral villages. Merger will help peripheral villages to develop as rural laws and cannot shape urban growth sustainability. Okay? So if merger will be there, then we can say integration will be there. It will be easier for the rural people because their own government will be there in the urban areas also. It will be helping them. Okay? So first point. Help entire settlement to emerge as homogeneous entity, integrating urban planning. The same continuation of that point. Administrative efficacy will be there because separately we are not supposed to, same IAS officer is not supposed to look after the urban local bodies and the Panchayati Raj institutions, but we can bring about the administrative efficacy because the objective is very clear. They are functioning in an integrated manner, right? Then economics of scale, financial efficiency will be there. We are supposed to allocate funds in a very objective manner, ठीक है? Then addressing the rural urban migration, so ये rural urban migration होता है वो भी कम हो जाएगा because integrated system will be there. The rural people will be having the sense of belongingness. So it will not be exactly, we can say that rural urban migration will be taking place up to large extent. Okay? Then there will be some problems also if we are going for this merger. Tax rise for the rural people. Rural people are not having, too much taxes to pay as of now. But when they will be coming to the urban areas, there will be so much of taxes. That will be a problem. Okay? So one. Then employment issues. Villages not get benefit under the MGNREGA. ठीक है? So हमारे पास MGNREGA for the rural employment, but when they will emerge, so villager will not be getting the employment. That issue will be there. Loss of administrative approachability due to the centralization. So like in the rural, for the rural people, it will be a problem because centralization will be taking place, or they may be beyond their reach. Then village leaders often see mergers result into loss of political power. Okay, so village people, less aware people, when we will be providing for these kind of merger, तो उनको तो ऐसा ही लगेगा ना that the urban counterpart will be dominating the things. तो merger होना चाहिए, but should be taking into the consideration of the issues of rural people. And now you see that out of these conclusions only we got the idea about the conclusion. आप conclusion कैसा लिखोगे? considering this pros that yes, it is a good idea. The merger can be a good solution. It will be providing for the above sad benefits, but it should be done by taking care of all the issues involved, as rural people may be at the disadvantage. So it should be taken care of, that we are addressing all the issues involved. Then only we are going for the merger. So that is what we can suggest. Now the next we have is, this question is also more or less straightforward. So poverty and malnutrition create a vicious cycle adversely affecting human capital formation. Okay? It is both of them, poverty and malnutrition, creating vicious cycle adversely affecting human capital and formation. What steps can be taken to break the cycle? Okay? So first of all, we will be introducing about the poverty and malnutrition. ठीक है? So आप poverty and malnutrition के बारे में explain करोगे. You can start with the data. You can talk about the prevailing issues, how the poverty and the malnutrition are the problem, right? You will talk about that. So here you see that poverty and malnutrition creates a vicious cycle adversely affecting the human capital formation. ठीक है? अब आपको थोड़ा ये सोचना पड़ेगा that poverty and malnutrition, how they will be creating the vicious cycle with respect to the affecting the human capital formation. ठीक है? एंड आपको पता होना चाहिए ह्यूमन कैपिटल फॉर्मेशन कैसे होगी. सो ह्यूमन कैपिटल फॉर्मेशन विल बी देयर बिकॉज ऑफ द एजुकेशन, बिकॉज ऑफ द हेल्थ, बिकॉज ऑफ द एम्प्लॉयमेंट, बिकॉज ऑफ द पीपल्स पार्टिसिपेशन इन द गवर्नेंस, अवेयरनेस. अगर ये सब होगा, सो वी विल बी हैविंग ह्यूज कैपिटल फॉर्मेशन. बट द पॉवर्टी एंड malnutrition creates a vicious cycle adversely affecting the human capital. If poverty will be there, malnutrition will be there, people will not be able to get the education, people will be able to get the better healthcare facilities. So it will be creating the vicious cycle. That means not education, more poor, and again we are roaming around and that particular circle. Okay, and ultimately it is failing to develop the human capital. Okay, so this is the one. What steps can be taken to break the cycle? So this is a simple question. Okay, so you first of all you are explaining here that they are interconnected issues and detrimental impact on the capital formation. Agar poverty and malnutrition hoga, detrimental impact will be there. Vicious cycle perpetuates poor health, limited education, reduced productivity, ultimately hindering the economic development. This kind of introduction you can provide. Okay, then vicious cycle for poverty and malnutrition. So first of all we are looking into impact of human capital formation. So reduced productivity hogi, education deficiency hogi, so definitely it is having direct impact on the human capital formation. After that we will have the poor health outcomes will be there. Okay, and intergenerational impact. Intergenerational impact meaning that if your current generation is poor and malnourished, it is having the malnutrition also, then your kids will be also facing same kind of issues. So that's why we are saying those kind of issues will be transferring to other generation. Intergenerational impact will be there. Okay, so because of all these reasons we are saying it will be having the malnutrition and the poverty will be having the adverse impact on the human capital formation. Okay, so all these things was simple because anyone can guess like what will be the impacts of the poverty and the malnutrition. Anyone can guess, right? So we have the what steps we can take to break the cycle. Okay, so nutritional intervention. For example, we have come up with the midday meal scheme to feed the people coming to the schools, right? And integrated child development scheme where we are actually looking for all round development of children's. So these kind of schemes we have come up with. So what steps needed to break the cycle? We are suggesting the midday meal scheme. We can suggest the ICDS and then educational and skill development. So universal education we should provide. For example, Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan we came up with. A skill development program we are supposed to come up with so that people will be enriched, people will be, able to get the education, then they will be able to make themselves out of, helping them getting out of the vicious cycle of poverty and malnutrition. Okay? Social safety nets, direct cash transfer हम अपना सकते हैं, already we are doing that. Employment schemes we can provide, for example MDA and RGA, right? Community involvement, self-help groups. So already we are having so much of self-help groups working in the country. So we can further empower the self-help groups so that people will be empowered, especially like if the women are involved, women are empowered, which are helping themselves in bringing about, or avoiding the poverty and malnutrition. So these are the solutions that we can provide in this particular question. Okay? So, and accordingly on the same lines, you will be concluding that in order to break this vicious cycle, some futuristic measures are required as we suggested, and it can be done with the people's participation, it can be done with better data collection, it can be done with the help of, a proper assessment, what are the reasons behind this poverty and malnutrition, and accordingly we can serve people. Okay? So आप एक holistic conclusion, again futuristic and positive conclusion you will be adding here also. Then the next question that we have here is, now it is, little logical, little intellectual question we can say, okay, although familiar one again. And in the beginning, if you remember, I added that the problem with this question paper, particularly with respect to some questions, that questions are looking very familiar to us. Article 21 every day we used to read, we used to talk about, but जब आप क्वेश्चन को अंदर पढ़ोगे, so you will be getting certain difficulties. ठीक है? So आप देखिए क्वेश्चन, right to privacy is intrinsic to life and personal liberty. Okay, like it is very much associated with the life and personal liberty and is inherently protected under Article 21 of the Indian Constitution. It is inherently protected under the Indian Constitution. This is what is being said. That means it is part of that. Okay, explain. That is what we are explaining. In this reference, discuss the law relating to DNA testing of child in a womb to establish its paternity. So the next part, other part is a problem, because generally we do not, study all these things, although these kind of new technologies are very much prevalent. So one should know all these things, having understanding about the current affairs. Okay? So first of all, as the question itself is separately asking that it is intrinsic and is inherently protected under Article 21 of the Indian Constitution. So clearly you are supposed to talk about the right to privacy under Article 21. Okay? Ab right to privacy, earlier it was not available. So because of that we are supposed to explain that. Okay? So initially Article 21 only protected against arbitrary state action and has since been broadened to include many implied rights including the privacy. Okay? So initially it was not available, but over a period of time we have added so many rights, and one is the right to privacy. Okay? So that is what you will be explaining. Then after that, this is most important case to mention here, that is KS Puttaswamy Union of Indian case 2017. In this case, Supreme Court clearly highlighted right to privacy as fundamental right under Article 21 of the Indian Constitution. ठीक है? तो आपने पहले यहां पे इंट्रोडक्शन में आर्टिकल 21 को ही एक्सप्लेन कर सकते हैं, दैट इट इज अबाउट द राइट टू लाइफ एंड पर्सनल लिबर्टी. ठीक है? आप उसको एक्सप्लेन करेंगे. देन आफ्टर दैट यू विल बी टॉकिंग अबाउट दिस पर्टिकुलर केस and or this about this incident also, or this fact also, that earlier it was not available, but over a period of time the horizon of Article 21 has been broadened and the rights like the right to privacy have been added. And in this KS Puttaswamy case, Supreme Court clearly mentioned that right to privacy is a fundamental right under Article 21. ठीक है? तो आप देख लीजिए, privacy is intrinsic to life and personal liberty inherently protected under Article 21 of the Indian Constitution. ठीक है, तो इस चीज को एक्सप्लेन करने के लिए you will be required to add some argument in favor of this particular right terminologies, intrinsic to life and personal liberty. So you can say that since the Article 21 is about right to life and personal liberty, okay, right to life and personal liberty, so as we through various Supreme Court cases we learned that right to life is not just about being alive. Right to life includes the right to have the meaningful life, dignified life. So on the similar line, while you will be explaining about all these things, on the similar lines you can talk about that the privacy, right to privacy is also one part of the liberty or one part of meaningful life, because without privacy it may not be possible to enjoy the dignified or the meaningful life. ठीक है, तो आप जब ऐसे explain करेंगे, so that will be matching the demand of this statement. Privacy is intrinsic to life and personal liberty and is inherently protected under Article 21 of the Indian Constitution. ठीक है, आप बोल सकते हो कि although it was not available but it was already available, because the meaning of right to life and personal liberty is so big. It is so big. Right to remain silent, right to walk anywhere across the globe, right to marry a person of your choice, right to privacy, all these things should be available under Article 21. Right to information, right to education, because it was added in the appendage part of Article 21A, right to education, 21A. Because of that only, because Article 21 ambit is so big, तो आप ऐसा कुछ context establish करेंगे and you will be fulfilling. ठीक है, then after that the second part, so law relating to DNA testing in a child in the womb to establish paternity. So हम ये information provide करानी पड़ेगी. It is very factual and it is supposed to be provided. So DNA testing is often used to use in cases of paternity disputes. तो आपको पहले ये लिखना पड़ेगा इस तरीके की information. Then you will provide some cases. For example, we have Bhavani Prasad Jaina, Convener Secretary, Odisha State Commission for Women, right? Supreme Court here mentioned that DNA testing should not be used as the routine procedure. The DNA testing should not be used as the routine procedure, but without the right to privacy of the parties involved. So Supreme Court clearly mentioned in this thing that DNA testing something, it should not be like you are using very frequently, every now and then you are using this. It should not be the case. Okay, so that is what you are highlighting. Then you will talk about this PCPNDT Act 1994. Okay, so this PCPNDT Act 1994 talks about that including DNA testing for purpose of determining paternity are heavily regulated. They need to be heavily regulated when we are talking about the this DNA testing kind of thing, right? So this is quite factual, and this is the second part of the question was little problematic, we can say, because you should have understanding what are the provisions with respect to the DNA testing in our country. Okay, now we have, going forward, we have next question to talk about, and this question is, we are having, what changes has the union government recently introduced in the domain of center state relation? ठीक है, so recently here does not mean that it is they are asking about very recent, like in some months. No, we are talking about quite some time recently, like in some past few years they are talking about. Okay, so what changes union government recently introduced in the domain of center state relations? ठीक है, suggest measure to adopt to build trust between the center and state and for strengthening federalism. ठीक है, so there are two ways, two kinds of measures you are supposed to explain, and you should you know, it is very important that you are explaining the things very separately. Okay, that how the center state relations can be brought about and how we can brought about the features of federalism. Okay, and so it is about having information, that you should have information कि हमने क्या क्या किया है recently, for example the GST. ठीक है, and उसके बाद it is easy, you can talk about this, you can actually provide information with respect to the second part of the question and the third part of the question. ठीक है, so introduction में आप क्या करेंगे, since the question is directly about the center state relation, so what should be done, बताइए. Definitely here we should provide the constitutional provisions. So first of all we will provide the constitutional provisions. ठीक है, so what you are providing, part 11 of the Indian Constitution, under this article there is this is 264, but it will be 245, right, 245 to 293, and it is covering the legislative, the administrative and the financial. All kind of relations have been explained under the part 11 of the Indian Constitution from article 245 to 293. ठीक है, so this you can provide at the very first at the very beginning, that is the introduction. ठीक है, so center state relation के बारे में you are providing the constitutional mandate, constitutional provisions that we are having. ठीक है, after that these are all the recent changes recently government what has done. So quickly we will look into implementation of GST, changes in the financial relation. 15th फाइनेंस कमीशन की रिकमेंडेशन हुई है that it will be reducing the state share. उसके बाद farm laws, they will be sparking protest, raising question about the center state relations. यहाँ पे सेंटर का डोमिनेशन हो जाएगा स्टेट की डोमेन में. Amendment in disaster management, during COVID pandemic time में center will be penalizing the having autonomy, and then use of article 356. ठीक है, so all these recently government has brought about some changes. तो आपको ये information provide करानी पड़ेगी as the question is clearly talking about what changes has union government recently introduced in the domain of center state relation. ठीक है, so definitely GST should be coming, definitely the farmers law will be coming. तो आपको बस provide कराना है what changes has been provided, right? After that here we have the measures to build trust between center and states. Measures to build trust between center and state. Next part will be about the federalism. ठीक है, so यहाँ पे क्या करेंगे, we will be promoting the idea of cooperative federalism. ठीक है, that is we will be having the federalism, but also there will be large scale cooperation existing. This is the agenda of Niti Aayog also. So that is what we are supposed to provide in order to bring about better center state relation, what is question is asking, right? Then next is ensuring fiscal federalism, that actual devolution of powers with respect to the finances are taking place. That is what we are supposed to do. That is what the way we can bring about the better financial center state relations. Okay? Then we have the regular consultation. How we can brought about the regular consultation? How we can brought about the regular consultation? So we can brought about the regular consultation by way of interstate council, by way of zonal councils. हमारे पास zonal councils हैं, हमारे पास interstate council है. So through that we should be able to try bring about the regular consultation, strengthening role for the interstate council, transparent governance, resolving regional disparities, decentralization of power. All these suggestions you can provide in case of bringing about the better center state relations. ठीक है? After that the question's last part is you are supposed to provide measures, ठीक है, to strengthen federalism in India. Federalism कैसे करेंगे? So clear division of power, making sense, very simple to talk about. आपको पहले से भी पता है ये चीजें. These are the very basic kind of things. Strengthening the Rajya Sabha power, enhancing judicial role because it will be in a better position to intervene. Okay, institutional reforms. Okay, the way our institutions are working, we are supposed to change according to the time and need. empowering local bodies, flexibility in policy implementation, because that policy may not be suitable to a particular state. So we are talking about the flexibility, and then we have addressing grievances through the mediation. Now we have the next question. Okay. So this is the next question that we are having, and this is our second last question. So this question is about, you can read that you are supposed to explain the reasons for growth of public interest litigation, PILs. As a result of it, has the Indian Supreme Court emerged as the world's most powerful judiciary? Okay? Just because of the growth of PIL, Supreme Court of India has become the most powerful judiciary. Okay? Most powerful judiciary, yes. So first of all, it is making clear sense that explain the reasons for the growth of public interest litigation. Simply आपको PIL explain करना है in the introduction, ठीक है? Because we are supposed to address the keywords in the question, so that examiner will be getting idea that yes, you are understanding and you are making the things very clear from the beginning. So आप keyword को यहाँ पे explain कर दोगे, ठीक है? So first of all, PIL you will explain, and after that you will talk about reasons for growth of public interest litigation. So reason क्या होंगे? Judicial activism. Because people are not now people are aware. People know what are their rights. People know how to bring about the benefits. People know how to make the authorities accountable. So हमारे पास क्या हो रहा है? Judicial activism हो रहा है. Okay. So judicial activism होगा. That means you are aware of the judicial aspect, and so you will be resorting to the PIL kind of thing. Okay. Access to justice. Access to justice हो रहा है. Better transportation facilities, or we can say better online platform. Prevalency of the internet is providing better access to the judiciary, we can say, or better awareness is providing for better access. So people are becoming aware. Things are connected nowadays. So we are having the access to justice. Then we have societal concern. People are societal concern, like if in my locality inequality is there is crime against women, and there are sanitation problem, there are transportation facilities problem. So I will be maybe resorting to the PILs. ठीक है? Then after that, media attention. Media attention बहुत ज़्यादा हो गया है. Any issues will be there. For example, farmers protests were there. So at that point of time, there was so much of media attention. So जब media attention होगा, so PIL will be coming. More PIL will be coming. Then executive and legislative inaction. When the executive and the legislative branch of the states are not functioning well, then at that point of time, we used to have the PILs. PILs will be rising in that context. ठीक है? Now, has the Indian Supreme Court emerged as world most powerful judiciary due to rise in PIL? So आप इस point को very carefully how you are supposed to explain. So these are the parameters, these are the ways how you will be explaining this particular part. So judicial activism through PIL, it is setting the ground that the Supreme Court will be becoming more powerful. Okay, because when PIL will be there, the things will be more, we will be transferring the power more to the Supreme Court, because some or the other way the legislature or the executive had failed, they are not able to provide solution. So we are coming up with the judicial activism through the PIL. So it is bringing about the more power to the Supreme Court. Okay? Then expansion of Article 21, that is right to life. How exactly it is strengthening the power of Supreme Court? So it is strengthening the power of Supreme Court by the logic that yesterday, I mean to say in the past, when we were having very limited understanding, the awareness, so at that point of time, there is a possibility that we will be having little narrow meaning of Article 21. ठीक है, but as we will be proceeding further, as the society will be growing, then at that point of time there will be different interpretations of Article 21 will be coming, like the way we discussed about the right to privacy in other question. ठीक है, so when the society is growing, society is emerging, so new kind of needs are arising. When the new kinds of needs are arising, now the Supreme Court is having more role to play, Yesterday Supreme Court was just dealing with the conforming to the constitutional aspect, we can say, okay, but now social media platforms are creating new kind of challenges, so Supreme Court is also supposed to take care of those challenges also. So we can say definitely that Supreme Court is having more power because of that. Then role as the guardian of constitution, any issues with respect to the constitution, Supreme Court will be looking into. Then impact of landmark judgments, and then we have addressing government inaction, judicial independence, yes, it is important. The conduct of judges cannot be discussed in the parliament, they cannot be removed at any point of time but by the special majority of the house. All these things are making the powerful Supreme Court powerful. Then we have the global comparisons. So yes, looking into all these aspects, we can say that PIL has definitely strengthened the Supreme Court power. But जब आपसे पूछा जा रहा है has Supreme Court power has emerged, so up to some large extent you will be agreeing, but आप लिखोगे however it is not that it is doing beyond the law, or it is PIL is all about enhancing the power of Supreme Court. No, it is also about protecting the constitution, the earlier role that it was already providing. Okay, so balanced kind of conclusion you will be adding. I hope it is making good sense. Now we will be moving on to our very last question, and the last question is, discuss India as secular state, okay, and compare with secular principles of US Constitution. Okay, so the question is again very simple, very direct kind of question, So हम सबसे पहले क्या करेंगे यहाँ पे, we will be talking about the Indian secularism. ठीक है, so India is having diverse culture, religious belief, countries constitution guarantees right to freedom of religion and all. So some basic lines you will be adding with respect to the secularism. Okay, or you can talk about the secularism also directly, that Indian constitution, the secularism has been added in the preamble by the 42nd Constitutional Amendment Act 1976, and also article 25 to 28 talks about the secularism, okay, to provide to freedom of religion. So in other way they are providing the secularism. ठीक है, आप इससे भी explain कर सकते हो, or you can talk about the diversity, and then you can set the ground why you are talking about the secularism. ठीक है, so about the secularism basic introduction you will be giving, and after that you will be comparing with that of the US Constitution. ठीक है, so here you can see that we are having the comparison of the Indian Constitution scheme with that of the US Constitution. ठीक है, so what will be the major differences that the Indian notion of secularism is having with that of rest of the countries, we can say. So Indian notion of secularism is called as the positive notion of secularism, because here the state will not be following the policy of touch me not. No, it will not be following that policy, but हम यहाँ पे क्या करेंगे, we will be treating all the religions equal, and state will be providing equal assistance to all the religions without any discrimination. But in case of US, we will be having the negative notion of secularism, because their state will not be providing any assistance to any kind of religion. So that is called as negative notion of secularism. So that way, this way you can compare that in case of India, the secularism explicitly mentioned in the preamble and constitution, ये हमारे पास clearly mentioned है, but in case of US, secularism implied through the first amendment no explicit mention term secularism. They are not having explicitly mentioning the term secularism. Okay. And next is state maintains equal distance from all the religion and treat all the religion impartially. As I mentioned कि हम positive notion of secularism follow करते हैं, but they will not be following, right? यहाँ पे separation of church and state will be there, and state cannot, the government cannot favor, cannot provide any assistance to any religion. That is what we are having. Then the next we have is article 25 to 28. So definitely on the similar lines we are commenting that we are having the these articles which are explicitly provided in the constitution, which are talking about the secularism. Okay, but in case of American constitution, you can say that the first amendment guarantees freedom of religion, and it is providing about the prohibiting Congress from making any law related to the secularism. Okay, so I hope the idea is very clear. We'll be looking into this question first again. So question was about discuss India's secular state and compare with that of the secular principle of US. So हमने यहाँ पे सबसे पहले Indian secularism की बात की. What kind of secularism we have? Then we talked about certain constitutional provision, that is the preamble, article 25 to 28, and then we compared the Indian constitution scheme with that of the US constitution scheme. So this is how we are supposed to deal with this question. And with this, I'll be ending this session. I hope you learned from this session a lot. Thank you.